The sensors at the edge of the galaxy screamed warnings that made no sense. Director Breen stared at the readings, his three eyes blinking in sequence as his brain tried to process the impossible data. Something massive had just appeared from nowhere, violating every law of physics his species had spent 10,000 years documenting. "Run the scan again," he ordered, his voice tight with concern. The technician, a young Ashtari female, worked her console with trembling hands. "Director, the readings are consistent. A vessel just materialized at coordinate 79 Alpha. No jump signature, no warp trail, nothing. It simply exists where it did not exist one moment before." Breen pulled up the visual feed. The ship floating in the darkness looked ancient by human standards, all riveted hull plates and primitive fusion drives. He recognized the design from historical databases. It was a colony ship from Earth's early expansion period, back when humans were still struggling to understand faster-than-light travel. "Identify the vessel," he commanded. The computer responded immediately. "UESS Wanderer. Launched from Earth orbit 47 years ago on a colonization mission to the Tau Ceti system. Lost with all hands. Presumed destroyed when contact ceased 3 months into the voyage." But here it was, intact and somehow sending signals in perfect galactic common, a language humans had only learned after joining the galactic community 15 years ago. The ship that vanished before humanity even knew other intelligent life existed was now speaking the universal tongue like a native. "They are requesting docking permission at Gateway Station," the technician reported. Breen felt his blood run cold. "Denied. Establish a security perimeter. Nothing goes in or out until we understand what we are dealing with." Within the hour, 30 warships surrounded the Wanderer, weapons hot and shields raised. Scientists scrambled to scan the mysterious vessel, only to find their instruments sliding off its hull like water off glass. Every sensor beam, every probe, every attempt to see inside the ship simply failed. The technology should not exist. Ambassador Patricia Cole arrived at Gateway Station on the fastest transport available, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The Wanderer had been her sister's ship. Rebecca Cole had been the ship's medical officer, one of 200 souls lost to the void decades ago. Patricia had been 17 when the news came, and she had carried the grief ever since. Now she stood in the observation deck, staring at the impossible ghost floating in space. "They look exactly like the launch photos," said a voice beside her. Patricia turned to find Director Breen, his alien features unreadable but his tone grave. "Every member of the crew we can visually confirm has not aged a single day. 47 years, Ambassador. Where have they been?" Before Patricia could answer, the airlock between the Wanderer and Gateway Station opened. Security teams tensed, weapons ready for anything from armed invaders to hostile aliens wearing human skins. What emerged instead was a man in a faded Earth Fleet uniform, his face calm and his eyes holding depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal human comprehension. He was followed by 22 others, all wearing the same uniform, all looking exactly as they had in their personnel files from nearly half a century ago. The man in front stepped forward and offered his hand to Patricia in the old Earth custom. "Ambassador Cole, I am Captain David Ross of the UESS Wanderer. I apologize for our delayed arrival." Patricia stared at him, her throat tight. "Captain Ross, you have been missing for 47 years. You were declared lost with all hands." Ross nodded slowly. "From your perspective, yes. From ours, we have been gone much longer." He turned to address the assembled crowd of diplomats, scientists, and security personnel. "We encountered something out there, something that changed everything we thought we knew about the universe." Director Breen pushed forward, his patience exhausted. "Explain yourself, human. Where have you been? What technology allows your ship to resist our scans? Why do you speak galactic common when your species had not yet encountered us when you vanished?" Ross met the director's eyes without flinching. We fell through a tear in space-time, a quantum rift that should not exist according to current understanding. On the other side, we found something waiting. The architects, they called themselves, beings that existed before this universe began its current cycle. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several species representatives laughed outright, dismissing the claim as madness or deception. Ross continued, unbothered by their disbelief. They were not hostile, they were evaluating, testing to see if younger species had evolved enough wisdom to handle what is coming. We spent 200 years with them, subjective time. We watched 177 of our crew grow old and die while we learned everything they would teach us. He gestured to the people behind him. Those of us who survived were the youngest when we left Earth. We chose to stay, to learn, to understand. The architects gave us knowledge, technology that seems impossible because it operates on principles your current science has not yet discovered, and they gave us a warning. Patricia found her voice, though it came out as a whisper. A warning about what? Ross turned to face the massive windows overlooking the void of space. Something is coming from the spaces between dimensions. The harvesters, entities that feed on civilizations during universal transitions. They consume entire species, entire worlds to fuel their continued existence. Director Breen's translator struggled with a sound that might have been a laugh or a curse. And we are supposed to believe this fantastic tale, to accept that you have been chosen by ancient beings to save the galaxy. Ross reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device, no larger than a human fist. He placed it on the deck and activated it with a touch. Light poured from the object, not bright enough to blind but strange enough to make everyone take a step back. Every screen in the observation deck flickered, then stabilized, showing new readings. The technician gasped. "Director, that device is powering the entire station. All reactors are now running at idle. The energy signature shows no fuel source, no conventional power generation. It is pulling energy from nothing." Ross picked up the device and returned it to his pocket. Not from nothing, from the quantum foam that underlies all reality. Zero-point energy extraction. It is one of the simpler technologies the architects shared with us. We have come to share it all freely with every species willing to listen. Because the harvesters are coming, and you will need every advantage to survive. The observation deck fell silent. Patricia could see the calculations running behind every set of eyes in the room. If the technology was real, if even a fraction of Ross's story was true, then everything was about to change. Director Breen straightened, his diplomatic training overriding his skepticism. "The Council will need to hear this, all of it, every detail, every claim, every piece of evidence you possess." Ross nodded. "Of course, but Director, there is one more thing you should know." He walked to the window and pointed at the distant stars. "See that section of space, coordinates 47 Delta, your sensors will show nothing unusual." Breen signaled for a scan. The results came back normal. Ross continued, his voice soft but carrying absolute certainty. "In approximately 6 months, that section of space will go dark. Stars will vanish from view as something vast moves between them and us. The architects told us we had 2 years to prepare the galaxy. We have less than half that time now." He turned back to face the assembled representatives. "The question is not whether you believe us. The question is whether you are willing to prepare for what is coming, just in case we are right." Lieutenant Owen Gray, who had been standing silently behind Ross, spoke for the first time. His voice was neutral, almost casual. "They are already early. The outer sensors will detect gravitational anomalies within the hour. The harvesters have accelerated their timeline." Patricia watched as security teams checked their equipment, as scientists pulled up long-range sensor data, as the reality of the impossible slowly settled over Gateway Station like a shroud. Her sister was still gone, but something had returned in that ship, something humanity needed, something the galaxy needed. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, something vast and hungry was moving closer. The interrogation room felt smaller than it actually was, packed with representatives from 14 different species, all demanding answers. Captain David Ross sat calmly at the center of the chaos, his hands folded on the table, while voices rose and fell in a dozen different languages that the translators struggled to keep pace with. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood beside a holographic display, trying to explain concepts that broke fundamental understanding of physics. She rotated a three-dimensional model of a quantum rift, her voice patient despite the 20th interruption in as many minutes. The rift was not a wormhole, she said, adjusting the projection. Wormholes connect 2 points in our universe. What we fell through was a tier between universes entirely, between dimensions that exist parallel to our own. A Viren military commander slammed his fist on the table. His species was known for their aggressive expansion policies and military strength. This is fiction. Elaborate lies designed to give humanity some advantage in galactic politics. Ross did not rise to the bait. He had learned patience in the timeless space with the architects. Commander Vray, we are offering to share everything. The dimensional equations, the energy extraction principles, the shield harmonics, all of it freely to every species willing to listen. Why? The question came from a Tellurian scientist, her crystalline form refracting the room's light into rainbow patterns on the walls. Your species struggled to establish yourselves in galactic society. Now you return with technology centuries beyond anyone else, and you simply wish to give it away. Tanaka answered before Ross could speak. Because technology means nothing if everyone is dead. The harvesters do not negotiate. They do not trade. They consume. Every civilization they encounter becomes fuel for their continued existence. Director Breen leaned forward, his 3 eyes focusing on Ross with uncomfortable intensity. You claim these architects showed you proof of this threat. Show us. Convince us this is not some elaborate deception. Ross nodded to Lieutenant Gray, who activated a memory crystal recovered from the Wanderer's logs. The hologram shifted, showing images that made several representatives recoil. Vast organic structures floating in space, each one larger than a moon, their surfaces writhing with movement that seemed wrong on a fundamental level. These are Harvester scout vessels, Ross explained. The architects had been observing them across multiple dimensional boundaries. They showed us what happens when a Harvester fleet arrives at a populated world. The image changed. A planet, green and blue and beautiful, orbited a yellow star. Then the Harvesters arrived. Within hours, the planet's surface began to change. Oceans evaporated. Continents crumbled. The entire world seemed to dissolve, its matter converted into pure energy that flowed into the Harvester vessels. 3 billion souls, Ross said quietly, gone in a single day. The species did not even have time to mount a defense. They did not understand what was happening until it was too late. The room fell silent. Even the skeptics seemed shaken by the images. Ambassador Patricia Cole spoke from her position near the door. Captain Ross, you mentioned the Wanderer experienced 200 years subjectively. Can you explain how that is possible? Ross met her eyes, and Patricia saw something ancient in them, something that had seen too much and carried too heavy a burden. Time does not flow uniformly across dimensional boundaries. In the space where the architects exist, causality operates differently. What felt like 2 centuries to us was less than 50 years in this dimension. You watched your crew die, Patricia said softly. It was not a question. Yes, Ross's voice carried the weight of lifetimes. We had a choice. Return early with incomplete knowledge, or stay and learn everything necessary to give our species, our galaxy, a fighting chance. 177 people chose to sacrifice their remaining years so that billions might survive. Tanaka pulled up another image. this one showing complex mathematical formulas. The technology the architects shared operates on principles we did not know existed: dimensional mechanics, quantum entanglement at macro scales, energy states that exist outside normal space-time. She pointed to a specific equation. This is the basis for our new shield system. It does not stop attacks. It shifts the protected object slightly out of phase with normal reality. Weapons pass through because the target is not entirely in this dimension anymore. The Tellurian scientist moved closer, her analytical mind clearly engaged despite her skepticism. That should require impossible amounts of energy. It would, Tanaka agreed, if we were using conventional power sources. But zero-point energy extraction provides effectively unlimited power. We are tapping into the quantum fluctuations that exist everywhere in space. Commander Vray stood abruptly. The Viren Empire demands access to this technology immediately. For the security of all species, we must control such powerful capabilities. No, Ross's voice was soft but absolute. The technology will be shared with all species equally, or not at all. The architects were clear on this point. They gave us knowledge not to create new hierarchies of power, but to give everyone the tools needed for survival. Vray's expression turned dangerous. You do not have the authority to deny the Empire. Actually, Patricia interjected, as this concerns human technology shared voluntarily, Captain Ross has every right to set conditions. Earth Fleet has already endorsed his decisions. Before Vray could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The lights flickered, and emergency protocols activated automatically. Every screen in the room switched to long-range sensor displays. Director Breen's face went pale, his skin losing its natural green tint. Gravitational anomalies detected at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts. Whatever Lieutenant Gray predicted is happening now. Ross stood, his movements calm despite the chaos erupting around him. Send probes. Visual confirmation will help convince those still skeptical. For 30 minutes, they waited as automated probes raced toward the anomalies. When the first images arrived, several representatives made sounds of distress in their native languages. The darkness between the stars was not empty. Something vast moved through space, its form blocking out distant light. The probe's sensors struggled to define edges, to measure dimensions, to classify what they were seeing. Then the probe's transmission cut out. Not gradually, not with static or interference. It simply ceased to exist mid-broadcast. Tanaka pulled up the final frames of data. The probe was not destroyed. It was converted, broken down at the molecular level and absorbed. Another probe, approaching from a different angle, sent back clearer images before it too vanished. The thing in space was not a ship in any conventional sense. It was organic, alive, its surface covered in structures that might have been sensory organs or weapons or something entirely beyond current understanding. That is a Harvester Scout, Ross said. Approximately 1/10 the size of a true harvest vessel. It is here to evaluate this system's defenses and resources. Commander Vray stared at the screen, his earlier aggression replaced by something that might have been fear. How do we fight something like that? You cannot, Gray answered, speaking for only the second time. Not with conventional weapons. Your missiles will miss because it exists partially outside normal space. Your energy weapons will be absorbed and converted into fuel. Your ships will be consumed before they get close enough to matter. Ross turned to face the assembled representatives. But with dimensional shields, you can survive its attacks. With zero-point weapons calibrated to match its dimensional frequency, you can hurt it. With the knowledge the architects provided, you can fight back. Director Breen stared at Ross for a long moment, then at the screen showing the dark shape in space. Finally, he spoke. What do you need from us? Permission to begin immediate technology transfer, Ross replied. research teams willing to learn new principles, manufacturing facilities to produce the new shield generators and weapons, and most importantly, cooperation between species that have never worked together before. The Tellurian scientist stepped forward. My government will commit resources. If what you say is true, we have no choice. One by one, other representatives nodded. Even Commander Vray, though he looked like the words physically hurt him, agreed to VRIN participation. Patricia watched as humanity's role in the galaxy shifted in real time. The struggling newcomers were now the teachers, the guides, the ones with knowledge everyone else desperately needed. Ross turned to her, and for just a moment she saw past the ancient wisdom to the tired man beneath. Your sister would have been proud of you, Ambassador. Rebecca always believed humanity's strength was our ability to bring others together. Patricia felt tears threaten but held them back. She believed in you too, Captain, in all of you. Outside the station, the Harvester Scout continued its silent approach, unaware that its arrival had just unified species that had been rivals for centuries. The real battle was about to begin. 3 weeks into what Captain Ross called the Awakening Protocol, and the galaxy was transforming faster than anyone thought possible. Dr. Tanaka stood in a massive research facility that had been empty before humanity shared the architect technology. Now it buzzed with activity from 40 different species, all working to understand principles that rewrote their textbooks. A young engineer from the Kelron species stared at her console, mandibles clicking in agitation. This equation suggests matter and energy are not distinct states, but positions on a dimensional spectrum. Everything my professors taught me is wrong. Tanaka smiled gently. Not wrong, incomplete. Your professors taught you what they knew with the tools they had. Now we have better tools and deeper understanding. She pulled up a demonstration on the holographic display. A simple cube rotated in space, its form solid and predictable. Then Tanaka activated the dimensional shift. The cube seemed to blur, its edges becoming uncertain. It was still there, still visible, but somehow not entirely present. Matter does not disappear, she explained to the gathered scientists. It simply moves along the dimensional axis. Think of it like stepping sideways into a room that overlaps your current position. You are still in the building, but not in the same space. The Kelron engineer reached out, her hand passing through the shifted cube without resistance. Her eyes widened. No energy barrier, no force field. The object genuinely exists in a different state. Exactly, Tanaka confirmed. This is the basis of the shield system. When a weapon approaches, the shield shifts the protected vessel along the dimensional axis. The weapon passes through the space where the ship appears to be, but the ship is actually existing fractionally outside that space. Across the facility, similar breakthroughs were happening. A Tellurian physicist finally understood zero-point energy extraction after Ross spent 6 hours working through the mathematics. A VRIN weapons specialist successfully modified a plasma cannon to fire along dimensional frequencies, creating a weapon that could hit targets regardless of conventional shields. But not everyone was adapting smoothly. In a private meeting room, Ambassador Patricia Cole listened to complaints from 3 different species representatives. The humans are holding back, insisted a delegate from the Parvin Collective. They share basic principles but not complete specifications. We suspect they keep the true secrets for themselves. Patricia kept her voice level, though frustration simmered beneath her calm exterior. Captain Ross has shared everything exactly as the architects instructed. The reason some concepts seem incomplete is because your scientists are trying to force new physics into old frameworks. It does not work that way. Then perhaps, the Parvin delegate said coldly, humans should simply build the technology for us, if we are too primitive to understand. That would defeat the entire purpose, Patricia replied. The architects did not give humanity finished technology. They gave us understanding. They taught us to think differently about the universe. If we simply hand you completed devices without that understanding, you will not be able to adapt them, repair them, or improve them when the harvesters inevitably change their tactics. The meeting ended with no resolution, leaving Patricia exhausted and worried. Not every species was willing to let go of old certainties to embrace new truths. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Gray ran combat drills with mixed species teams, teaching them enhanced perception techniques. 50 soldiers from a dozen different worlds stood in a training facility, trying to achieve what seemed impossible. "Stop thinking linearly," Gray instructed, his voice carrying across the room. "Time is not a river flowing in one direction. It is an ocean, and you are learning to sense ripples before they reach you." A human soldier raised his hand. "Sir, how does this not violate causality? How can we react to something before it happens?" Gray walked over to him. "You are not seeing the future. You are processing present information faster and more completely than normal consciousness allows. Every action has precursor signs, body language, micro-movements, shifts in attention. Your brain normally filters most of this out. We are teaching you to perceive all of it simultaneously." He demonstrated by having the soldier attempt a surprise attack. Before the man even tensed his muscles, Gray had moved out of range. Your breathing changed. Your weight shifted. Your eyes focused on your target. All of this happened before your conscious mind decided to strike. I simply read the signs. A Viren soldier looked skeptical. "This works for you because you spent 200 years learning it. We have weeks at best." "The architects accelerated our learning," Gray admitted. "But the principles work for anyone willing to train. Some of you will achieve basic proficiency within days. A few might master it completely. Even partial success will increase your survival chances dramatically." Back in the research facility, the first successful shield test was about to begin. A small transport vessel hovered in space, its hull equipped with prototype dimensional generators. Dr. Tanaka monitored the readings from a safe distance while Ross observed with Director Breen. "Are you certain this will work?" Breen asked, his three eyes tracking the vessel nervously. "As certain as we can be without field testing," Ross replied. "The mathematics are sound. The energy output is stable, but theory and reality do not always align perfectly." Tanaka initiated the test sequence, activating dimensional shift in 3, 2, 1. The transport seemed to shimmer, its outline becoming slightly fuzzy. Automated weapons fired from multiple angles, conventional missiles and energy beams converging on the vessel. Every projectile passed through the space where the ship appeared to be, hitting nothing. The weapon's fire ceased. The transport remained intact, its crew reporting no damage. Breen made a sound that the translator rendered as relieved laughter. "It works. By all the ancestors, it actually works." "Phase 1 works," Ross corrected. "Now we need to produce these generators in quantities large enough to outfit a defense fleet, and we need to do it in weeks, not months." Manufacturing became the next challenge. Traditional production methods were too slow. Ross and Tanaka worked with industrial engineers to develop new techniques, using dimensional principles to accelerate fabrication processes. Within days, the first production facility came online, printing shield generators at a rate that seemed impossible. But it required cooperation between species in ways that made some uncomfortable. Viren provided raw materials. Tellurians offered their crystalline processing technology. Humans shared the dimensional blueprints. The Kelron contributed automated assembly systems. Patricia watched from an observation deck as the first combat vessel rolled out of the facility, fully equipped with dimensional shields and zero-point weapons. It was not a human ship. It belonged to a minor species called the Wrenth, whose entire fleet had numbered only 12 vessels before the harvesters arrived. The Wrenth captain approached her, his feathered crest raised in what she had learned was a sign of respect. Ambassador Cole, my people owe humanity a debt we can never repay. Patricia shook her head. Humanity learned these technologies from beings far older than us. We are simply passing forward what was given freely. When this is over, perhaps we all pass it forward to the next species who needs help. 2 months into the Awakening Protocol, and nearly 400 vessels had been retrofitted. Research teams made new breakthroughs daily. Combat training produced soldiers who could react with impossible speed. But the Harvester Scout remained at the edge of the system, watching, waiting, learning. Ross studied the latest reports in his quarters aboard the Wanderer. The Scout had not attacked. It simply observed, collecting data on defenses and capabilities. Tanaka entered without knocking, a habit from their long years together. It is analyzing us, learning our patterns. Yes, Ross agreed. Which means the main fleet will arrive with countermeasures already prepared. Every day we delay is a day they learn more about our defenses. So we force the engagement, Tanaka said. We attack the Scout before it can report back. Ross nodded slowly. Gather the combat fleet. It is time to see if all this training and technology can actually kill a harvester. Gray appeared in the doorway, his timing perfect as always. The fleet is already assembled and waiting for your order, Captain. Ross stood, putting on his uniform jacket. Then let us introduce the harvesters to a galaxy that fights back. Patricia received the alert in her quarters. The combat fleet was moving out. 400 ships against a single Harvester Scout. The entire galaxy watched, hoping the impossible technology would prove as revolutionary in battle as it appeared in testing. The first true engagement was about to begin, and everyone knew the outcome would determine whether the galaxy united in hope or fractured in despair. In the darkness at the edge of the system, the Harvester Scout detected the approaching fleet and began preparing its defenses, unaware that its opponents understood principles of physics it had never encountered. The test was coming for both sides. The Harvester Scout was larger up close than any sensor reading had suggested. Captain Ross watched from the Wanderer's bridge as the Coalition fleet approached, 400 ships representing 37 species flying in coordinated formation. The Scout itself resembled nothing so much as a massive organic growth, its surface covered in structures that pulsed with bioluminescent light. All ships report dimensional shields active, Lieutenant Gray announced from his station. 0-point weapons charged and ready. Dr. Tanaka monitored energy readings from her console. The Harvester is scanning us. Its sensor sweeps are unlike anything in our databases. It is probing our ships at quantum levels. Ross opened a fleet-wide channel. All vessels, remember your training. Conventional tactics will fail. Trust the new systems. Trust each other. The fleet moved within weapons range. Nothing happened. The Harvester simply floated in space, its surface continuing to pulse with light. It is studying us, Ross said quietly, learning our capabilities before it commits to action. Then the Harvester attacked, not with missiles or energy beams, but with something far worse. The space around it rippled, and hundreds of smaller organisms erupted from its surface. Each one was the size of a fighter craft, their forms constantly shifting as if unable to maintain stable shapes in normal space. Harvester drones, Tanaka identified. They will attempt to attach to our hulls and begin conversion. The drones moved with terrifying speed, crossing the distance in seconds. The Coalition fleet opened fire, and the void lit up with weapons fire in a dozen different energy signatures. Most shots missed entirely. The drones seemed to flicker in and out of existence, avoiding attacks by existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. A Wrenth frigate took a direct hit as 3 drones slammed into its hull. Alarms blared across all channels as the crew reported their outer armor beginning to dissolve. Activate dimensional shields to full power, Ross ordered the stricken vessel. shift out of phase with the drones. The Wrenth captain hesitated for only a moment before following the instruction. His ship shimmered, and the drones, suddenly finding their target in a different dimensional frequency, lost their grip and drifted away. "Target the drones with zero-point weapons," Ross commanded. "Match their dimensional signature and fire." The fleet adjusted their targeting systems. Weapons that had been missing suddenly found their marks. Drones exploded as energy beams calibrated to hurt things that existed between dimensions connected with devastating effect. But for every drone destroyed, the Harvester released 3 more. The organic vessel seemed to possess unlimited resources, its mass converting into attack forms faster than the fleet could destroy them. A Viren battlecruiser took heavy damage as its shield generators overloaded. Commander Vray's voice came through the static-filled communication. "We cannot maintain shields and fire weapons simultaneously. The power draw is too great." "Rotate positions," Ross ordered. "Shielded ships move forward and draw fire. Unshielded ships fall back and provide covering fire. Switch every 30 seconds." The fleet adapted, ships moving in and out of formation with practiced precision. The tactic worked. Drones found it difficult to maintain attacks on targets that kept shifting dimensional states while other ships destroyed them from angles they could not defend. But the Harvester itself remained untouched, protected by a field that made targeting impossible. Every weapon fired at the main body simply curved away, redirected by distortions in space-time. "We need to get closer," Tanaka said. "The gravitational distortion has a limited range. Inside that boundary, our weapons should connect." "Getting closer means entering its conversion field," Gray warned. "Any ship that gets too close will start breaking down at the molecular level." Ross made the decision that captains dreaded. "Wanderer will make the approach. Our shields are the most advanced. We can survive longer in the conversion field than any other vessel." Patricia's voice came through from Gateway Station, where she monitored the battle with growing horror. "David, you cannot sacrifice yourself and your crew." "We are not sacrificing anything," Ross replied calmly. "We are doing what we came back to do, what 177 people died to make possible." The Wanderer broke formation and accelerated toward the Harvester. Immediately, the Coalition fleet adjusted, providing maximum covering fire to keep drones away from the human vessel. As the Wanderer entered the Harvester's inner defense zone, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. The hull started to vibrate, metal groaning, as molecules attempted to break their bonds. "Dimensional shields to maximum," Ross ordered. "All available power to maintaining structural integrity." Tanaka worked her console with desperate speed. "We have maybe 90 seconds before the shields collapse." The Wanderer dove closer, weapons firing continuously at the Harvester's core. The first few shots missed, bent away by the gravitational field. Then Gray made an adjustment to the targeting systems, calculating not where the target was but where the distorted spacetime would make it appear to be. The next volley connected. Zero-point energy beams punched into the Harvester's surface, and for the first time, the massive organism reacted with what could only be interpreted as pain. It thrashed in space, releasing a wave of energy that sent the Wanderer tumbling. 60 seconds to shield failure, Tanaka reported, her voice strained. "All ships target the wounds we created," Ross commanded the fleet. "Pour everything into the damaged sections." 400 ships focused their fire on the points where the Wanderer had breached the Harvester's defenses. Energy beams from dozens of different species, all calibrated to the same dimensional frequency, converged on the vulnerable spots. The Harvester's bioluminescence began flickering irregularly. Its form started to destabilize, sections of its mass breaking apart and drifting away. 30 seconds, Tanaka warned. Then the Harvester did something unexpected. It stopped fighting. The drones ceased their attacks and began returning to the main body. The gravitational field collapsed, and the harvester fled. It did not use conventional propulsion. One moment it was there, damaged and desperate. The next moment, space folded around it and it simply vanished, leaving behind only scattered debris and confused fleet. Silence filled the communication channels as every ship tried to process what had just happened. "We won," Commander Vray said, his voice carrying disbelief. "We actually heard it." "It retreated," Ross corrected, guiding the Wanderer away from the battle zone as repair crews scrambled to fix shield generators. "It learned that we can fight back, and it withdrew to report that information to the main fleet." Director Breen's voice came through from Gateway Station. "Captain Ross, preliminary casualty reports show 12 ships lost, 43 damaged, but we stopped a harvester. We proved the technology works." Patricia added quietly, "We also proved they can learn from each encounter. The next harvester will know our capabilities." Ross nodded, though she could not see him. "Which is why we need to accelerate production. We proved we can fight one scout. The main fleet will have hundreds of harvest vessels, each one larger and more powerful than what we just faced." Tanaka pulled up sensor logs of the harvester's retreat. "I recorded the dimensional signature of its escape method. If we can analyze it, we might be able to predict where it went." Gray was already working on the calculations. "Based on the energy signature and the direction of the spacetime fold, I calculate it returned to a staging area approximately 40 light-years from here. It will need time to regenerate its damaged tissue before it can join the main fleet's approach." "How much time?" Ross asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4, Gray replied. "Then it becomes combat-ready again." Ross addressed the fleet. "All ships, return to base for repairs and restocking. Well done today. You proved that the galaxy can stand against the harvesters. Now we need to prepare for the real battle." As the fleet dispersed, Patricia stood in the observation deck at Gateway Station, watching ships limp back to dock. 12 crews would not return. 12 ships worth of people who had trusted in the new technology and given their lives to test it. But hundreds more had survived what should have been impossible. They had fought something from beyond normal space and forced it to retreat. She received a private communication from Ross. "Your sister would have been proud of them, Patricia, all of them." Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. "She would have been proud of you too, David. You gave them a chance." "We gave them knowledge," Ross replied. "They gave themselves a chance by having the courage to use it." In the medical bays, wounded crew members received treatment. In engineering sections, teams worked to repair damaged systems. In briefing rooms, officers analyzed battle data and adjusted tactics. And far away, in a section of space that sensors could not reach, the Harvester Scout regenerated its wounds and transmitted everything it had learned to the approaching fleet. The first battle was over. The war was just beginning. 40 days after the first battle, and the Harvester main fleet was 3 weeks out. Captain Ross stood before the Coalition Council with a proposal that made even his closest allies uncomfortable. "You want to invade their dimension," Director Breen said, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence as if trying to reset his understanding. "You want to take the fight to the space where these creatures originate." Ross nodded calmly. "The architects showed us the path exists. The harvesters come from a dying dimension, one that is collapsing under its own entropy. If we can seal the connection between their reality and ours, we stop the invasions permanently." Ambassador Patricia Cole leaned forward. "David, you said yourself this would be a one-way trip without proper anchors. How many lives are you proposing we sacrifice?" "None," Ross replied. "I am asking for volunteers, 200 crew members willing to attempt the impossible." The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some species called it madness, others called it humanity's death wish. A few listened with cautious interest. Dr. Tanaka activated a holographic display showing the dimensional barrier between realities. We have developed beacon technology that can create permanent barriers between dimensions. 7 beacons, placed at specific coordinates within the harvester dimension, would seal the rift completely. And the crew placing these beacons, asked a Tellurian representative, would need to navigate dimensional space, survive its hostile environment, plant the beacons, and find a way home before the barrier activates, Tanaka admitted. The mission has a 30% projected survival rate. That is not a mission, Commander Vray said flatly. That is suicide with extra steps. Ross met his eyes. Every member of the Wanderer's original crew knew we might not return. 177 of them died in the service of knowledge that could save billions. I am asking for volunteers who understand the same mathematics. Over the next week, 200 individuals from 30 species stepped forward. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, and specialists of every kind. Some joined because they believed in the mission. Others joined because they had lost too much to the harvesters already. A few joined simply because someone needed to try. The Wanderer underwent massive modifications. Its dimensional drives were enhanced to survive the harsh environment between realities. Its hull was reinforced with materials that could withstand physics operating under different fundamental constants. Lieutenant Gray trained the multi-species crew in survival techniques that seemed impossible. In dimensional space, your thoughts have mass. Your fears can become solid. You must maintain absolute mental discipline or the environment will exploit your weaknesses. A young Kelron engineer asked the question everyone was thinking. How do we fight enemies made of mathematics itself? You do not fight them, Gray replied. You accept them, understand them, and move through them. Fighting in dimensional space only makes things worse. On the day of departure, Patricia met with Ross privately in his quarters. You could send someone else to lead this mission. You have already given enough. Ross smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. I spent 200 years learning to navigate dimensional space. I am the most qualified person for this mission, and you know it. That does not mean I have to like it, Patricia said quietly. Your sister used to say the same thing, Ross replied. Every time I took a risky decision, Rebecca would argue with me for an hour and then support me completely. I miss that. Patricia hugged him, something she had never done before despite months of working together. Come back, David. We still need you here. The Wanderer departed with minimal ceremony. 200 crew members from 30 species, united in a mission that defied probability and common sense. The Coalition fleet watched from a safe distance as the modified human vessel activated drives that pulled energy from impossible sources. Space around the Wanderer began to twist. Colors appeared that had no names, geometries that hurt to observe directly. Then, with a sound that registered more as a feeling than actual noise, the ship slipped sideways out of reality. The transition was violent. Crew members screamed as their perceptions tried to process information their brains were not designed to handle. Time seemed to flow in multiple directions simultaneously. Gravity became a suggestion rather than a law. Ross guided them through the chaos with the calm of someone who had done this before. Focus on the beacon coordinates. Do not try to understand what you see. Accept it and move forward. Tanaka worked her console even as the instruments gave readings that contradicted themselves. We are inside the dimensional barrier. The harvester reality should be accessible from these coordinates. They found it after what might have been hours or might have been minutes. Time had no meaning in the space between spaces. The harvester dimension appeared as a wound in reality, a place where physics had gone terribly wrong. The crew stared through the viewports at a universe that was dying. Stars burned in colors that should not exist. Planets orbited in patterns that violated gravitational laws. And everywhere, the harvesters moved like antibodies in a sick body, desperately trying to sustain their failing home. "They are not invaders," said a Tellurian scientist, her crystalline form refracting the impossible light. "They are refugees. Their dimension is collapsing, and they feed on ours to keep their reality stable." Ross had suspected this, but seeing the proof still hit hard. "Which does not change what we must do. If we do not seal the barrier, both dimensions will eventually collapse." The mission began. The Wanderer moved through the dying dimension, navigating between harvester vessels that seemed unaware of the intruders. At each coordinate, a team would deploy and plant a beacon while the rest of the crew held position. The first 3 deployments went smoothly. The fourth encountered problems when local physics suddenly inverted, turning mass into energy and energy into thought. 2 crew members were lost before Gray managed to pull the rest back to safety. At the 5th coordinate, they encountered native dimensional predators, creatures that existed as pure mathematics, feeding on the consciousness of anything that entered their territory. The crew learned what Gray had tried to teach them about acceptance rather than resistance. Those who fought the predators suffered. Those who acknowledged them and moved through calmly survived. By the 6th beacon, they had lost 37 crew members. The survivors were exhausted, traumatized, and questioning whether they could complete the mission. Ross gathered them in the cargo bay, which had become their meeting space. "We knew the cost when we volunteered. We can turn back now, and no one will call us cowards. Or we can plant the 7th beacon and give both our dimension and theirs a chance at survival." A human engineer raised her hand. "Captain, what if instead of sealing the barrier, we stabilize their dimension? Dr. Tanaka's research suggests it is theoretically possible." Tanaka looked up sharply. "I mentioned that as speculation, not a viable plan." "But it could work," the engineer insisted. 7 beacons configured differently could create a stable energy flow between dimensions, not sealed but balanced. The crew debated for what felt like hours. Save their home by dooming another reality, or risk everything trying to save both. Finally, Ross put it to a vote. The decision was close, but the answer was clear. They would attempt the impossible thing, the human thing, the compassionate choice that might doom them all. They would try to save everyone. The 7th beacon was modified. Its function changed from barrier to bridge. As it activated alongside the other 6, energy began flowing between dimensions in a controlled manner. The harvester dimension started to stabilize, its entropy slowing. And in normal space, the harvester fleet stopped its approach. Confusion rippled through their collective consciousness as their home dimension suddenly no longer needed emergency feeding. The Wanderer prepared to make the dangerous journey home. Hopping the beacons would hold long enough for them to escape dimensional space. The galaxy held its breath as the harvester fleet simply stopped moving. Hundreds of massive bioships hung motionless in space, their bioluminescent surfaces pulsing with what might have been confusion or might have been communication. Ambassador Patricia Cole stood in Gateway Station's command center, watching sensor displays that showed both the frozen harvester fleet and the empty space where the Wanderer had vanished. No one knew if Captain Ross and his crew had succeeded or failed. They only knew the harvesters had stopped advancing. "Should we attack while they are vulnerable?" Commander Vray asked, his hand hovering over weapons authorization. "No," Patricia said firmly. "We wait, we see what happens next." In dimensional space, the Wanderer fought its way back toward normal reality. The 7 beacons had created a stable energy exchange, but the path home was still treacherous. Dr. Tanaka monitored the beacon network while Lieutenant Gray guided the ship through dimensional currents that threatened to tear them apart. "The beacons are holding," Tanaka reported, though her voice carried exhaustion. "Energy is flowing from our dimension into theirs at a controlled rate. Their entropy is stabilizing." Ross checked the casualty reports. 37 souls lost on the mission. 163 remained, battered and traumatized but alive. Can the beacon sustain the flow indefinitely? Theoretically, yes, Tanaka replied. We created a balanced system. Our dimension has excess energy from continuous expansion. There's needs that energy to counteract collapse. It should be sustainable for millions of years. A Kelron technician looked up from his station. Captain, I am detecting movement ahead. Something is approaching our position. The view screen showed a harvester vessel, but not one of the massive bioships they had fought before. This one was smaller, more elegant, its form shaped with obvious intelligence rather than organic chaos. Gray tensed, it is blocking our path home. But the harvester did not attack. Instead, it broadcast a signal that the Wanderer's computers struggled to translate. The message came through as concepts rather than words, feelings rather than sentences. Understanding, gratitude, confusion about why prey would save predator. Ross opened a return channel, trying to convey meaning across the massive gulf of different evolution and different physics. Because destroying you would not save us. Only understanding saves anyone. The harvester vessel remained still for a long moment. Then it moved aside, clearing the path to normal space. More than that, it projected a navigational guide, showing the safest route through the dimensional barriers. The Wanderer followed the guide and emerged back into normal reality near Gateway Station. Alarms immediately blared as coalition forces detected both the human ship and the harvester vessel that followed it through. Hold fire, Patricia commanded, overriding automatic defense protocols. Let us see what happens. The harvester vessel materialized fully in normal space, its form adapting to different physical laws with visible effort. It broadcast another message, this time using proper galactic common learned from analyzing centuries of coalition transmissions. You saved our reality when you could have destroyed it. We did not understand such behavior was possible. We wish to learn. Director Breen stared at the screen showing the harvester ship. It wants to communicate. After everything, it wants to talk. Ross appeared on the communication channel from the Wanderer's bridge, his face showing the strain of the mission but his voice steady. The harvesters are not mindless consumers. They are an ancient species desperate to survive. We gave them a way to survive without destroying others. Now they want to understand the thinking that led to that choice. Over the following weeks, an impossible dialogue began. Harvester representatives met with coalition delegates in carefully shielded environments. The bioships were so different from mechanical vessels that simple proximity required special precautions. But they talked. The harvesters explained their history, how they had drained their own dimension first through careless expansion, then turned to consuming others out of desperation. They had been trapped in a cycle of destruction for eons, unable to see any other path. The coalition explained concepts like cooperation, sustainable development, and long-term thinking, beyond immediate survival. Ideas that seemed obvious to younger species were revolutionary to creatures whose entire existence had been defined by emergency measures. Dr. Tanaka worked with harvester scientists, sharing knowledge of dimensional mechanics. In return, the harvesters shared their understanding of biological engineering, their ability to shape living matter at will, their perspective from billions of years of existence. Lieutenant Gray trained with harvester warriors, teaching enhanced perception techniques while learning their methods of existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The exchange of combat knowledge became mutual respect. Ambassador Patricia Cole found herself negotiating treaties between species that had been trying to exterminate each other months before. The harvesters will share their bioengineering knowledge freely, she explained to skeptical coalition members. In exchange, we provide ongoing access to the dimensional energy flow that sustains their reality. And if they betray us, Commander Vray demanded, if this is all deception. Patricia gestured to the sensor displays showing harvester ships working alongside coalition vessels to establish permanent monitoring stations around the dimensional beacons. They are giving us access to their home dimension, Commander. They are teaching us their language, their science, their history. Either this is the most elaborate deception in galactic history, or they genuinely want peace. Ross spent his days coordinating the integration efforts, but his nights were haunted by the faces of those lost. 37 crew members who never came home, 177 from the original Wanderer voyage. So many sacrifices to reach this point. One evening, Patricia found him in an observation deck, staring at the stars. You look like a man carrying the weight of multiple worlds. Ross smiled faintly, just wondering if we made the right choice. We could have sealed their dimension, guaranteed our safety. But you chose compassion instead, Patricia said. You chose to believe that even ancient, desperate creatures could change if given a chance. That is the most human thing you could have done. The most human thing, Ross repeated, or the most naive. 3 months after the beacons activated, the first joint Coalition Harvester research station opened in neutral space. Scientists from 40 species and one-dimensional realm worked together on projects that seemed like fantasy. Biological ships that could think, dimensional drives that required no fuel, medical techniques that manipulated matter at the quantum level. The galaxy transformed not through conquest or competition, but through cooperation born from necessity and sustained by choice. Director Breen stood with Ross at the dedication ceremony for the research station. Your species has been part of the galactic community for less than 2 decades, Captain, yet you have changed everything. Ross shook his head. We simply passed forward what was given to us. The architects taught us. We taught you. Now we all teach the harvesters. Knowledge flows like water, Director. It goes where it is needed. And what comes next? Breen asked. With the harvester threat resolved, what challenges remain? Ross looked toward the distant stars where the architects had once resided. The architects left this dimension for a reason. They said younger species needed to grow wise before growing powerful. They were testing us. Did we pass? Patricia asked, joining them. We passed the first test, Ross replied. We chose understanding over destruction, cooperation over isolation, but the architects mentioned other challenges, other cycles. This is not the end of anything. It is barely the beginning. Far away, in the space between dimensions, the 7 beacons continued their work. Energy flowed in endless exchange, sustaining 2 realities that had learned to coexist. The harvester dimension slowly healed, its stars burning with renewed stability. And in normal space, ships from 100 species worked alongside creatures from another reality entirely, building something unprecedented in galactic history. A true alliance, born not from shared heritage or mutual benefit, but from the simple revolutionary idea that even enemies could become partners if someone had the courage to offer understanding instead of destruction. Captain David Ross watched it all and thought of the 200 years spent in dimensional space, of the 177 crew members who died to make this possible, of his sister Rebecca, who had believed humanity's strength was bringing people together. They had brought together more than people. They had brought together dimensions. And somewhere in the cosmic distance, the architects watched and approved. The younger species had taken their first real step toward inheriting the responsibility of dimensional stewardship. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in eons, the galaxy faced its future united rather than divided. It was a good start.